At InDigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
Carbine, it's multimedia. You can get text, translate to whatever language, getting away with the legacy equipment and going into a cloud-based solution.
It's the first time in U.S. history that we have an EZNet through cloud-native call handling.
As a police officer, to have the victim go video, that's unheard of.
You're getting upgrades every month, not every year.
To schedule your free Carbine demo, please visit carbine.com/WTT.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital as well as Carbine, and as always, thank you to patrons, but also now Facebook subscribers. I've recently added Facebook for subscriptions for the podcast. So it's basically a light version of Patreon. Patreon, I just revamped all the tiers. There are now seven tiers and tons of perks and bonus content that's going to be coming, but that does not lessen anything from Facebook. Facebook subscribers get a lot of stuff as well, a lot of cool stuff. So if you want to check that out, you can check us out, and I'll mention the link here coming up towards the end. But again, thank you to patrons of the podcast as well as Facebook subscribers. I thank you so very much. But also, this is going to be the last episode for the week of this year. It is December 27th, and I already had. It was Christmas time. It was great. It was a good time. We got my family visiting and everything. So things have been very, very well. So we've got this episode going out. And I just want to say thank you to Carbine for being a sponsor for the last couple of years. Thank you so very much. We will be parting ways going into 2023, but I thank you for being a sponsor the last couple of years. It was excellent. So thank you. Also, we've got a lot of different stuff that's going to be coming up for 2023, and some stuff that I can't even mention yet, but I want to mention really bad, but I can't. But if you are a Facebook subscriber to the podcast or a patron of the podcast, you will find out first, and you'll be finding out here probably in the next week or so. Some big things coming up for Within the Trenches podcast as well as Within the Trenches media. And I'm just super excited about that. And then conferences that are going to be coming up as well starting next month already. Whew. All right. Out of the way now. I'm excited for my guest today, and she was actually recently an amazing speaker for Dare to Be Great 4 that we finished up just a few weeks ago, and that one registration is still available, so make sure to go out there and check it out, and that's on crowdcast.io/c/DTBG4, and there's about 36 hours of free powerful sessions that are there, continuing education for 911 dispatchers and call takers, but also if you are just simply curious about what dispatchers go through and some of that you are looking to get into the profession, you can check that out as well and enjoy, because there are many, many, many hours worth of free powerful sessions that are there. And we're going to be doing part 5 that'll be coming up December of 2023, so look out for that. But again, I'm excited for my guest today, and her name is Sabrina. She's a supervisor at Hutchinson-Reno County 911 out of Kansas. Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's going. Getting through the holiday season.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's very nice to get through. I don't know about you, but the last few days, the weather has just been so gnarly with snow
Oh,
and everything, and I can just imagine the calls that you all were getting as well.
yeah. So we had the freeze snap here. The one day it was -30 when I left work. It was
Oof.
crazy. And then Thursday morning or Friday morning, I can't remember which, when I was leaving, we had snow squalls roll in, and I drive 45 minutes home. And
Oh
so
no.
I hit the road about the time all this was coming in.
That's horrible.
It was whiteout conditions at times. It was
Ugh.
crazy.
Especially when it gets to, for those who are watching and listening, if you are not in an area where it snows, um there is a certain temperature that if you get past that, none of the salt is going to work.
No, no. And they weren't even putting that out. The roads are freezing because it's too cold.
Yeah.
Everything that they put down wasn't working. I have not taken so many frozen pipe. My water's busted. I need the water department to come shut off our water calls in like the last
Jeez.
72 hours.
That is nuts. Yeah, I remember, we would get phone calls from people that are driving, and they would say, "I know I'm not supposed to be on the road, but I can't miss work. Like,
Right.
I have to go to work. Is there any way that the trucks, the plows can go out and put some salt?" And we're like, it's already surpassed. Like, this is
Yeah,
negative weather. That
yeah,
salt is not going to work. They've already put sand out there, but that's not working either.
right.
So
Yeah, it's crazy.
drive super slow. That's all we could say. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah,
There's
and
not much else.
I was in that boat going home because normally it takes me 45 minutes, and it took me
Mhm.
almost an hour and a half to get home.
Oh my.
Yeah.
I so before we get started here, so you just made me flash back. I remember one morning. It had snowed all night. Blizzard conditions, whiteout, all of it. And I was driving this little four-door sedan. It was a Kia Sophia. And this was a car that my wife and I had brought from Florida. It was her car that she had. So, I mean, it's fit for Florida, right?
Yeah.
And the tires, no snow tires, and also we don't make a lot of money in dispatch, so I didn't have money to just be like, just drop and say, "Give me the best snow tires you have." And my brakes weren't the greatest either. So where my dispatch center was located was basically in the middle of the woods. It was in this county complex in the middle of the woods, and it was the craziest thing, because you would be driving on a back road and then turn, and then you see all of the buildings for all the county buildings and stuff. And the thing was, though, is that the plows, they were not out yet when I would be getting out of dispatch
Yeah.
at like 4:30 in the morning. So I would have people ask and say, "So are you going to drive home, man?" Because I was like 45 minutes away too. And I would say, "I'm not staying here, because if I stay here, I run the risk of somebody calling in and I'm going to get forced for it. So I'm going to risk it." So here's me in this little four-door with all of these trucks like in back of me in these back roads that haven't been plowed yet, but you can see like lines where other cars had gone through. So I'm just like slamming the gas and just doing my, opposite turn for the tires to slide
Right.
through, and
There
I
you
would
go.
make it home. But just like you, it would take like an hour and a half, two
Yeah.
hours to finally get there.
Yeah. And I had
Oh,
people going, "Oh, you should just stay. We have showers, and we have a like quiet room that actually has a bed in it." I'm like, no, this is my one day off One day
Right.
off. I'm going home.
Yes. Oh man, you took me back for sure. Well, let's go back in time now to before these moments of
Right.
going driving in this weather. Um, how did you get into public safety to begin with? But also, how many years have you been doing it?
So I'm almost at my 15-year mark. Like
Nice.
in May will be 15 years.
Mhm.
So getting into it, I kind of grew up around it. My parents, I think I was about 6 or 7 probably, and both my parents took an EMT class. Volunteered for the town that we lived in, which was super small, only had like 500 people.
Mhm.
So, and then they became part of the volunteer fire department too, that we had there. And my mom worked for like 30 plus years as a nurse at the hospital. So I grew up around it, and my grandpa actually was the chief of police in another small town in the county that we lived in.
Oh,
So
no way.
yeah, so I grew up around it. I knew like the officers and EMS people and stuff like that. So yeah, it was just like second nature to me.
What
So
what was that like growing up then around that? You know, do you remember any of the stories? Do you remember hearing like radio traffic and just being
I
kind of fascinated with it, or what
yeah,
was
I
that
mean,
like?
I knew what my parents were going out on, what kind of
Mhm.
calls or whatever, and so yeah, I mean, I knew what they were doing. It was kind of cool. It was kind of cool to see what they were doing, and I actually had one. I think, a junior in high school, and I was gone, and of course, I had to be home by midnight, and I knew I was going to miss the midnight mark. And I called my parents, and nobody would answer. And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to be in so much trouble because I'm late." So I get home, and I ran the corner, and the fire department and the ambulance are at the corner that I round, and like everybody's there. And I stopped so I could talk to my parents, and they're like, "You just need to go home. We'll talk to you later. You need to go home." And I knew something was not right at that point.
Mhm.
By the time I got home, I was probably already in tears, and I can remember my parents coming in and telling me that one of my classmates, her and I used to drive to school together, had been shot, and they told me, and it was just like, I mean, growing up in a small town, you knew everybody. So
Mhm.
my parents knew these kids. We grew up together, so yeah, it was very impactful, you know.
Wow.
So she didn't end up surviving, but I mean, they got her to the hospital, but later on she was pronounced brain dead, and so her family donated her organs and stuff. But that was, can't save
Jeez.
everybody. My parents knew everybody that they knew everybody that they were running on because we had such a small town.
Mhm.
So yeah, but I grew up around it, and that's just something I always wanted to do. So
Do you feel like that experience kind of pushed you a little bit as well to get into the profession?
well,
Only like go ahead.
no, so yeah, so I call this my second career because my
Mhm.
first career and what I fell in love with was the EMS side of it. So when I was a high school senior, I took my EMT class and then progressed, and I became a paramedic, and I spent 20 plus years as a paramedic and a flight paramedic before I ever came to 911. So yeah.
Wow. Well, first off, I'm sorry, that that happened so long ago, but it feels like, as you were saying, with your first job, this incident, there might have been something behind it a little bit, maybe in the back of your mind to just have kind of that, kind of a motivation, to get into this profession to try to help save others where, your friend ended up going through this.
Right. Yeah, like I said, it was just a small town, and it was just a way
Hmm.
for us to give back, and it's just something I grew up around, and I knew it, and I just it was in my heart. That's what I wanted to do, is be a paramedic, you
Hmm.
know. So I got to spend 20 wonderful years doing that. It kind of came to somewhat of a tragic end. The flight service that I was dispatching for, my original flight team, perished in an aircraft accident. I was originally scheduled to be on that flight that day and got called off at the last minute.
Oh, geez.
Um, so, and then about a month later, the aircraft that we were in, we were flying, we got caught in a thunderstorm, and we thought we were going down.
Hmm.
And our pilot was amazing; he got us out of it. And so after that, this was in New Mexico. All my family's here, and my niece had just been born shortly after that. And I was like, you know what? I'm coming home. My family's here. I've been doing it for 20 years. I'm tired. It's hard on the body. So let's just come home and figure out something else. So,
Wow. What what was it that, if you don't mind me asking,
sure.
you mentioned that you were supposed to be on that aircraft, but you got called off. What was it?
So one of the paramedics that was flying that day, she was actually fairly new. It was her
Mhm.
third day being on the aircraft, and she was in the process of moving and asked me if I would just flip with her a shift, and I'm like, sure, no problem. And she just like a day or two before said, you know what, never mind, we got it figured out. We're just going to do it another time, so I don't need you. And so that's the only thing that kept me from being on that flight that day.
Wow. Jeez. Again, as we were talking earlier about a different call before we started recording, not how what I expected
Right.
or how that story was gonna go. Jeez. So you've got that happens and everything, and obviously there are many, many reasons that you're here, all the work that you've done, those 20 wonderful years that you mentioned, and then now, getting into being in dispatch as well. And there's some other things that we're going to talk about that you're getting into as well with the RPL program. But you go through that, all that experience as being an EMT, something that you really wanted to do. You come back home. What pushed you to want to get into dispatch then?
So I came back home. I took a little break.
Hmm.
I was just like, I'm set good. I financially, I didn't need to hurry in. Let's just figure out the next move. And I thought about going to nursing school, you know, just different avenues, respiratory therapy, whatever. But I was like, I found out that the county that I live in, they had positions open for 911. And I'm like, you know what? I kind of have the background for it.
Hmm.
I've been around it. Let's see how this goes. So I applied. So that's, when I applied to them, I actually got hired on just part time
Hmm.
there. And before I was out of my training, they hired me full time. So,
So you already had, like you said, you had that background and everything
yeah,
already. You're listening to all the stuff on the radio. So in a sense, you're kind of training already that dispatch
right,
here that people develop, right?
right.
And so you've got all of that coming into it. Did you get a chance to do, even before you decided to try out dispatch? Were there ever any times that you got to sit in, do a sit along or anything like that?
I don't know that I ever really sat along for long periods of time, but I was
Hmm.
in and out of the dispatch center with them. Some of the people, obviously, that were in there, I knew them.
Hmm.
So when I went for my interview and stuff and got hired, I really didn't have a set in at all. So I was pretty much just hired and then started. So yeah,
Was there any testing or anything that went
I
along with it?
yeah, so we did it like a typing test. They kind of had like that split ear test. They had
Mm.
like a recording and with officers talking, and then like in between it, they were giving like tags or driver's licenses. So we were listening to this and having to write as many tags or driver's licenses down as we could during that. And then they kind of had like a how well are you hearing and memory test where they were having us place cards and stuff at different places. It would tell you. So yeah.
Oh man, that's a
Yeah.
new one.
Yeah.
That's that's definitely a new one right there. The listening to the audio. I did get to do that for one of the centers, the last center that I was at when I applied there, which was the county that I grew up in Allegan. I was applying at another county at the same time, a surrounding county, and that surrounding county, their very first test, 30 people in there listening to traffic, and that's how they were narrowing it down to like 10. Was if you could understand the officer chewing his microphone
Right.
and dispatch talking back, and it sounding kind of garbled and stuff, you were good to go. We would
Right.
bring, they bring you in, and I thought that was one of the best tests that I had ever done. Luckily for me, though, I had about 3.5 years experience already listening to all that stuff, so listening to that traffic was easy peasy. But there were other people in there with eyes like just popped open,
Yeah.
like I have no idea. I
I
don't
don't
know
know
what
what
they're
they
saying.
said.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm here just oh man, so that's good. So you had that experience and everything going in. They whittled it down, and then they bring you in. And now, is this the same center that you're working at now, or was
No,
it one before that?
yeah, this is the one before that.
Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah. So yeah, they brought me in.
Hmm.
Was only doing I was part time, so
Yeah.
I wasn't there the whole 40 hours or whatever. But that only lasted maybe a month or two, and then I ended up going full time. So it was kind of like on the job training though, because there is a
Yeah.
pretty small center. So we were learning protocols and mapping and the CAD and everything live as we were pretty much doing it, because the person that was training us was still working the console as well. So
And
yeah.
that takes me back. So, for this first center that you're at, then, how many people are on the floor at a time, and how big was the area that you were covering?
So it's a rural county. It's
Hmm.
400 square miles. So we had, for the most part, when I started out, where there was always at least two of us.
Hmm.
Sometimes there might be three but two of us all the time. So yeah, and so they're about half the call volume that I'm currently at. So they're probably at like maybe 60,000, 70,000 calls a year that they deal with. So
Oh man. So
yeah.
you get in there, and you're being trained, and like you said, you've got a trainer who's working the console at the same time. So what was it like when you first walked in? Like you're there for your first day, what is it that you see, and are you feeling overwhelmed at all?
No, I'm not really feeling overwhelmed because,
Hmm.
like, some of them in there, I already knew. I already knew these
Oh, okay.
dispatchers. So the funny thing is, the person that was training me was also an EMT and did volunteer. My parents and I ended up moving to a town close to where we had grown up at, and I did volunteer work for that ambulance service, and he was part of that too. And I helped like train him on the ambulance, and now he's training me in the dispatch center. So yeah, so I mean,
Oh, that's hilarious.
I might have been just a little overwhelmed with having multiple computer screens or
Hmm.
learning the new program and stuff, but there are several people in there I already knew from like growing up around it. So
See, that's always good when you get into a spot where there are people there that but then also at the same time, on the other hand, like you said, you get in there and you see the multiple monitors,
yeah,
and all the keyboards and mice or however it's set up. I remember walking in that first time at Allegan County Central Dispatch, and just seeing everything and everybody working like a well-oiled machine, and thinking, these guys are awesome. Like, am
right,
I going to be able to do the same thing? Like, it looks crazy. But also, I've I had to laugh to myself a little bit when you mentioned that you were part time, but it only lasted so long, and then you were full time, because it was the same for me. So when I was training part time, and then as I was getting close to being on my own, it completely switched. I was the last person who was ever a part-time dispatcher and call taker. They ended it after that. And because, well, I mean, we needed people.
right.
So that first weekend that I was full-time on my own, I got forced in like 3 times. It's like, welcome to dispatch.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think we ever had any more part timers after I originally got hired part time and went full time. I think we just continue to hire full time people.
They're like, we're done. Like,
Yeah,
screw this part-time stuff. We need
right.
full-time people all the time.
Well, it's
So
hard. You mean,
yeah.
you try to train, but they're not there full time, so maybe the training takes a little bit longer,
Mhm.
or it's kind of hit and miss when they come in. So the agency that I was at, we tried part time, and we've had some part time people, but it just doesn't work out with their schedule, or
Yeah.
so
Yeah, for sure. So then this first center that you're at, you end up going off and you're on your own. I mean, what was that like when you're first
So
starting out and these calls are coming in and everything? Are you ready? Like, is it more so? Are you more excited or kind of like? Have you ever seen the movie Armageddon?
yes,
Okay,
yeah,
so right before they're about to take off, and I forget his name right now. What is it? Owen Wilson. His character when they're sitting back and he goes, "I'm like 98% scared, or like 2% excited, or maybe it's the other way around. two
right.
percent excited, 98% scared." He goes, "Whatever it is, it's just so intense, and that's what makes it so good, or whatever." Was it kind of like that for
Yeah,
you, or were you just ready to go?
the nervous excited
Yeah.
part, yeah. So I was kind of just ready to go. I can remember I took a call one time and it was for an infant cardiac arrest though.
Hmm.
And there was some frustration because the supervisor, who's the guy that used to work EMS with me, he's like,
Hmm.
you can't give any type of instructions because at that point we weren't using EMD protocols or anything. He's like, just get the information and send. And I was just like, this that was the frustrating part because we didn't have anything to give, and that's the background I came from was,
Right.
and I was like, this sucks. This really, really sucks.
Oh,
So
yes.
that was probably the more frustrating part, especially on medicals, not being able to give them instructions or,
Yeah,
help them,
exactly. So there's a large chunk of those who listen to this podcast who are of the general public. So for those who are watching and listening, what is EMD? What does
So,
it stand for, and what is it actually?
so it's emergency medical dispatching,
Hmm.
and it's for medical calls. There's you can have it for fire and police too, but this one's specific for medical. And basically, we ask them a series of questions, and based on their questions, we give them instructions if need to, either on like CPR, choking, bleeding control. So it's really useful, and it helps people. Obviously, it helps the family, but we just didn't have it yet,
Hmm.
and so that was just the frustrating part. Thank goodness, probably about a year or so in, we finally did end up getting this emergency medical dispatching. So yeah, it took some of the frustration away, obviously.
Yeah, that's probably one of the hardest things too. Is so again, for the general public, those who are watching and listening, you know, you might get upset with us because we're asking so many questions, but you have to know though, EMS is already en route. And if
Right.
there's an officer close enough, they might end up going as well to get there to assess the situation before EMS gets there. And I said, if there is someone close enough, don't listen to this and be like, well, that guy said that
Yeah.
there's somebody else who's gonna be there. No,
Right.
it's just if there's a possibility that somebody else is closer, they end up going as well. But we have to ask all these questions to go through those protocols to be able to assist and send out the help that you need, for those who are calling in.
Yeah, and we try to stress to them it's not delaying anything. We're
Right.
asking these questions. The ambulance is being paid. They're already on their way. It's not delaying anything. It's just so we have more knowledge that we can give them so they know what they're going to
Hmm.
when they get there. So
Yeah, so that was a big thing for me as well. So when I first started out dispatching, I started out in a small PD in Florida, Central Florida. We were not EMD certified at all. But what we did was when we had a medical come in, we got all the pertinent information and quickly transferred them to county radio, which was the county central dispatch, and they were EMD certified and they would do the rest there. So we would just get this pertinent information transferred over and then page out for fire rescue to go to the house to be able to help out before
mm,
EMS got there. But when I ended up moving back home to Southwest Michigan and worked in Allegan County, we were EMD certified there. So that was a big, big difference for me making that switch, because now I'm doing all of these medicals, and like you had mentioned, like with the cardiac arrest with a child, or with an adult, whatever it is, cardiac arrest, that's a tough one
right.
there, and that is intense to be able to do it. But for you, one of the questions I wanted to ask, and you kind of answered it a little bit already, but excuse me, I was going to ask, like, how hard was it from all those years, being hands on to now basically having your hands tied behind your back? and just using your voice and going through these protocols and probably wanting to reach through the phone, right, to help people, but now you're just doing it over the phone.
Yeah, so and it's like I know it just it was frustrating at times.
Mhm.
It's like just follow your protocol, follow your protocol. Don't I had to shut my paramedic brain off and say you can't go in there and assess what's going on and make an assessment. You just have to read your protocols and go off of what they're telling you, you know. So it took a little while to get that like flushed out of my system, and I think it's still there at times, you know.
Yeah.
I feel like I think maybe this guy might be having a stroke based on what they're saying, but they're really not saying it, but it kind of sounds like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's there's still some frustration there sometimes, you know, but it was very, very hard at the very beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I had a former coworker who he kind of did the same thing. He came from EMS into dispatch, and I would hear him every so often saying certain things, and I'd be looking at the cards. I'm like, that's not. He's doing stuff from
Right.
being in the field. And after the call, I would go over and talk to him and be like, dude, you're great at what you do, but these are different protocols here in dispatch. You've got to follow them, man, because
Right.
otherwise it's a liability for us, or
Yeah.
something might happen or whatever. And so that it was really hard for him at first to be able to do that, but he ended up picking it up quick. But still, the only way that I can kind of relate to what that struggle is like is when someone calls in from a relay service and they're doing, like sign language or whatever with someone. And I would say, okay, can you ask them this? And they
Yeah.
would say, sir, no, you have to talk to me as if you're talking to them. And then I would say, oh, okay, I'm sorry. You know, what is this or that? And then I would forget already on the phone because everything is so fast. Can you ask them this, sir? I'm like, oh, you're right.
Just
Sorry.
ask the question.
Yeah.
Just ask the question.
Right. I'm sure the person for the relay service was like, "Oh my god. Like,
Right.
what
I
is
think
wrong with you?"
I think those relay services though deal with it all the time because I kind of do that too, and I can hear
Mhm.
every once we don't use them a lot, we don't get them a lot, but when we do, I can hear other dispatchers too in the center going, "So could you ask him?" I'm like, "No, just ask your question. Ask the question."
Right. Yeah. It's so hard sometimes, and people listening to this are probably thinking, how is it that hard? Well, it is. Like
Yeah.
when you're going, split second, like just talking, 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 it's almost because you have two people, right, that are on the other line. It's almost as if you are taking a medical or something with two people there, and the person who's on the phone is not the person who has the emergency. They're
Right.
calling for someone else. So that's why you're constantly
Yeah.
saying, can you ask them this? Can you ask them this? Can you just put them on the phone? They're like, no, I
No.
can't. Like, this is why I'm here. You're supposed to be talking to me.
Right.
Oh man. Yeah. Those can be difficult, but as long as you can train the brain,
Right. It
you
takes
get
a
through it.
little training, but you get there eventually.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely get to it. Now, um, how long did you stay at that first center before you moved to where you're at now?
So I was there for almost 10 years,
Mhm.
and I ended up being a supervisor there and training while I was there. So almost 10 years. I ended up leaving, um, and I actually took almost I probably about a year off. At that
Mhm.
time, my niece was living with me, and I just felt that I needed to be spend more time with her, um, just because of some family stuff that was going on.
Mhm.
And I took a job at the local school as a para so that I'd be off when she was off and all this stuff, which was great. But bless those paras. People talk about dispatch not getting paid much. Those paras in that school didn't get paid much either.
Oh,
So, like,
man.
way less
Yeah.
with that. So that was part of it. I ended up going back in to 911 and I missed it. I didn't realize how much I would miss it until I was out of there. So, um, and I think she knew she was old enough. She knew I kind of missed it too. So I ended up going back and applying to a couple different places and got hired on in the county that I'm currently at. So, yeah.
It's interesting to me so this is going to be episode 475, I think, something like that. And there are several people that I've spoken to who left for, whatever reason. And it just felt like they, not so much that it wasn't enough, like whatever it was that they ended up going to do after dispatch, they didn't have that same feeling or satisfaction of giving back or helping. And they end up coming back, especially because they miss it so much. And either the people that they're working with or the folks out in the field, whatever it may be, they end up coming back. And to me, I kind of feel like whenever I step into, whether it be my old center or another center that I'm visiting, I feel at home. I feel that like I'm
Right.
here. I don't know what it is.
I think that I miss that good stress, that stress
yeah.
that we have.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just really missed it. So yeah,
That's
I decided
awesome.
to come back. So
then you end up coming back, and now you're working at the county.
Mm.
What are some of the differences there then from where you were at in the beginning to over to the county now?
Well, so my original job was in the county that I work for or
Mhm.
lived in or am living in. I went to a bigger dispatch center, so I went to Hutchinson-Reno, which is a county adjacent to me.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I have a 45-minute drive. So they dispatch for the whole county as well. It's a bigger department, so we have double the call volume. I think last year we took like 147,000 calls or something like that.
Oh man.
So it was a lot bigger, a lot busier. And I had interacted with them before because they're adjacent to us. So we've had to call them. They've called us for stuff. So I just wanted to stretch myself a little and see how it was going to be in a bigger center. So through their testing process and got hired on.
So what was their testing process like?
So they used the critical test.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I had never taken the critical test, obviously, and I was like, I don't know if I passed this or not. I mean, it's kind of intense at times. But I did the critical test and passed it. And then I came in and did a 4-hour sit along with them. And went through my interview process with them. So unfortunately, my sit along that I did, it was a very slow day. They were hardly doing anything.
Oh.
So, isn't that typical?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I feel like when we have people come in right now. They still do sit alongs, and sometimes we just don't do anything. And it's like, this is not typical, let me tell you. So yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be always the way.
Right.
Most of the time, you do a sit along and there's nothing going on, or you have people who are coming in who have asked you about dispatch and are interested in applying. You're like, oh yeah, just come in with me for a few hours. Nothing happens. They're like, oh, I could do this. I'm like, oh,
right.
damn it. Like, this is not a true depiction of what goes on here. When the shit hits the fan, it hits the fan. So
yeah, right. Yeah, so I went through that and had the interview, and I think I had like 3 or 4 people interview me and went through the interview process with them. So, yeah.
All at the same time?
Yeah.
There was a panel one?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Those are...
So I had I think the assistant director at the time and the training coordinator and at the supervisor, and then our administrative assistant was in there too. So.
Oh man, I've told people, like, if you end up having a panel discussion, just stay calm.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of what they're looking for as well. Like, if there's multiple people asking you questions and the others are building on whatever question it was there, that is all designed basically to see if you can handle the pressure.
I'm telling you, I think I was sweating by the time I was staying calm, but I was like, I need to go outside. Some fresh air would be great about right now.
Yes, I remember a panel interview that I had. I was like sweating enough that I could feel it down my back, and I thought, man, like, I hope my deodorant holds up because this sucks right now.
I'm with you. I could feel the sweat dripping off my back, man.
Yes.
I've been doing this for 10 years prior, so I was still sweating bullets, though.
Oh yeah, there's something about those panel discussions that or interviews rather, that they can hit a certain way. But yeah, you get through it, and then you start your training and everything. So was the training pretty much the same as the previous place, or was it different,
Yeah.
like set up with different trainers and different stations?
So our training coordinator, it was kind of on the job too because they were
Hmm.
shorthanded, just like
Yeah.
everybody still is shorthanded. So we were actually in the center, going through protocols, going
Hmm.
through all the classroom stuff with that. And so once we got done with the classroom portion and we had to take at that time an actual test to get out of the classroom portion of it. And so after that, then we went to our training officer. And most of the time, like they were like your first console that you would go to. Well, we do call taking too. But I really didn't I don't remember having a lot of call taking just because I think probably a previous experience with that. And so the next console that they would go to is like the EMS and fire one, because it's probably the easier channel compared to the law enforcement channels.
Oh, for sure.
But this time around, they made me do the hardest channel first. They're like, "You got experience. We're putting you on this. Let's go."
Oh no.
Like, no. So it was the police department channel for Hutchinson. So Hutch PD's probably the busiest channel for us, and so that's my first one. And I was sweating bullets, man. I was just like, I am not going to keep up with these guys. I mean, my previous department at a time, for if I was on the police side of it, I probably had 6 officers, 7 officers out at a time. And now I've got 12, 13, 14, 15 officers, different beats, different.
Mhm.
I was like, I am never going to learn this.
Right. Yeah. It's like one monitor for just those who are on the road.
I think I know at least once, twice
Mhm.
actually, that I like had a breakdown and I pulled my training officer and I'm like in tears and I was like, I've been doing this for 10 years and I don't know if I'm going to get through this or not. And they're like, just breathe. You'll be
Yeah.
fine. I'm like, okay. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So it
Oh.
was interesting. So I got through that and then we went through the other 2 consoles.
Mhm.
So I mean, I probably got through it a little faster than obviously the new hires that we have that have no experience, and that's kind of what they were counting on with it. But it was not easy for sure.
Oh man. Yeah, those are definitely those moments where, you've got the experience, but when you're put in a different situation, in the sense that, more people out in the field,
Right.
more consoles, the call volume completely different. I had a kind of a similar moment where I'm in training, I'm close to being done, but I take this domestic call, and in the old system that we had, our CAD system, if you didn't have everything right the way it was supposed to be, that call would not go in. It would
Mhm.
not go into the computer, and I could not get it to go through. And I'm listening to someone yelling about, I don't remember if it was her boyfriend, husband, whatever it was, whoever the person was, rather. I'm listening. So I'm trying to remember every single thing that she's saying, and I cut my phone because I didn't have a headset, or at least at that console it wasn't working. So I cut my phone and I look over at my trainer and I said, "You're going to have to take this over." And I said, "I can't get this in." And she said kind of the same thing that was said to you: is just breathe.
Yeah.
And then, but also, no, I'm not going to take the call. You can do this. Just breathe. You're fine. Just go through it. And I did.
Right.
I got through it. And from that moment on, every single domestic call that I took, that was my call. Like that was the incident type that was mine. And I think it was because of that moment, that freak out moment that I had where I thought I couldn't do it, and my trainer being like, "No, you're going to do this. You've got this." It's kind of the kick in the ass that I needed, and I continued on. Those were my calls.
Yeah, and I think the most difficult was just learning the geography for this
Mm,
county because it's not a county that I grew up in that I
yeah.
really. I mean, I would go to the city, that
Mhm.
city. I've been in it, but not knowing the roads and everything, that was probably the biggest obstacle to overcome. Learning, and of course, everybody's like, Adam's Corner over here. Oh, I don't know Adam's Corner. Can you
Right.
tell me the crossroads?
Right. Yeah. It's just down from Bob's Road. You're like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
What's
So,
Bob's Road?
right. So yeah, geography was probably the biggest thing just to overcome, knowing where everything's at.
I remember one of the times in the beginning when I was working for the county. So it was the county that I grew up in. However, the west side of the county, that's where I grew up in. The east side of the county, I would go every so often, but I didn't know it as well as the west side. So I would have to do the same thing, which was
Right.
just like geo rides. And I would drive around there by myself and then see certain spots and just kind of build that picture in my head so that if anybody was ever over in that area, I would know exactly what they were talking about. So those geo rides were always good and everything. Now, there were a couple calls that we were talking about before we started recording and everything. Now, did these calls happen from the first center or the center that you're at now? So there
So
was.
one of them happened at the previous center.
Mm-hmm. So which one was that one?
So that would have been the triple murder suicide that I took, and I was probably only maybe 2 years into dispatching then.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
So not very long at all when that one occurred. So yeah, that was kind of a heartbreaker.
That came in. You're about 2 years. And if you feel comfortable saying, of course, like how did that even come in? What you take this call? Was it male, female, child, adult? Like
So,
who called this in?
well, so to start out with the call, we actually got a call from like the mother
Mm-hmm.
about her daughter and said, I can't remember all the details about it, but
Mm-hmm.
basically she'd been having trouble with her ex-husband and whatever. She was worried about her. She couldn't get a hold of her. Can we send somebody? So obviously we put it out. And I think the deputies are probably aware of kind of the situation because there were several of them that started down that direction. And the next thing we know, we get a 911 and I pick it up and it's from 7, I think he was 6 or 7 at the time, calling saying my mom and her new boyfriend had been shot. And I'm like, where are you at?
Right.
And this child was the most calmest child in the world. I mean, no adult has ever been this calm. And so I start questioning him about, he's like, yeah, they were in the kitchen. Her ex-husband, which was not his father, he had a sister there that was older, and it was her dad that had came in, and he said, yeah, so-and-so shot my mom and her boyfriend. And he gave me very detailed information on where they were in the house, how they were setting, all this stuff. And I asked him, well, where is your sister at? And he's like, well, she walked down the road with him, the guy that was doing the shooting. He goes, but I don't know where she's at. And so I'm just like, oh my gosh. So obviously my partner is giving this information out to the officers to like, let's step this up, And I was just trying to figure out where I could put him for him to be safe. Because he's now there. I didn't want him to go back in the house.
Right.
And stuff like that. And I asked him if there was any vehicles, and I actually tucked him away in a vehicle and had him set down in a vehicle, waiting for the deputies to get there. We were probably on the phone about 45 minutes with him, just because the deputies wanted to get more team members out there, knowing the situation. So, and setting up a perimeter and making sure everything was safe before they went in there. So yeah, he was able to tell me what the weapon looked like. I mean, very detailed information.
Wow.
Yeah. So, his sister, his half sister actually, she ends up popping up in a cornfield as the deputies are coming in. She had laid down and hid for that whole time.
Wow.
Until deputies got there. After it was done and said with, the guy that did the shooting, they found him on an adjacent road to the house, and he had shot himself as well.
Jeez. So, I will say that, and I don't know what it is, but for whatever reason, when children are the callers, they are definitely the best ones. They listen, they're very observant, clever, like, and they're the best ones. There are few adults that you can talk to that will be as good of a caller as a child caller, but the majority of the time, child callers very calm and they take direction like nobody's business.
Yeah, he never once, I can remember this vividly. He never once cried. He never got upset. He just, stayed calm the whole time. So, yeah, I mean, that was the longest call I think I've ever been on a phone with somebody for like 45 minutes, and it seemed like hours waiting for somebody to get there. So,
Jeez. Yeah, it's one thing, especially for those who are watching and listening right now, it's one thing to take a call that long and it seem even longer, but also there are calls, right, that you take that are so intense but are only like 3 or 4 minutes.
right.
But they feel like they're hours long.
Yes,
You're
yeah,
just like,
yeah,
please, somebody get there, as they're going through what they're going through, and they might be saying to you, get somebody here as fast as you can. And we're like, they're going as fast as they can. But in the back of your mind too, you're like, please get there. Please get there.
yeah.
But
I mean, the call obviously once we got done didn't end
Mhm.
because we're still dealing with the officers and they're still looking for this guy and all this stuff. And then we have family calling us and family showing up at the law enforcement center, and so
Yeah.
it was just a whole almost a whole shift, a whole 8-hour shift, because we weren't very far into our shift when this happened. So the
Mhm.
whole 8-hour shift we were dealing with this.
Jeez.
So needless to say, I was over the night. I was ready to go home, stressed to the tilt. Kudos to our administration that we had and then the detectives that worked the case, because they actually brought us in the next day and said, we have the pictures of the crime scene and whatnot. Do you guys want to come look at them and we can talk you through it and show you timeline of what happened, if that will help you
Wow.
guys?
That's
Um,
amazing.
so we did. Me and my partner went in there and we sat with the detectives for quite a while, and talked about it. So
See, that's a really good thing. And again, for those watching and listening that are from, the general public and stuff, this is something that we definitely need because dispatchers and call takers, the majority of the time, do not get that closure. And sometimes are not part of the debriefing either. So for them to call you all in and say and give you the timeline and walk you through it, man, I mean, just that alone gives me goosebumps because that's a good thing. Like
yeah,
there's a lot of places that don't do that.
yeah, it was nice. It was nice to
Mhm.
have that closure, and we got to find out that through talking to the detectives that he'd been out there for hours watching them.
Jeez.
So, but it gave us a sense of closure, and we kind of knew
Mhm.
what, and to know that there was nothing that we were going to be able to do for, the people that had been shot. And we did the right thing to make sure that we kept him safe,
Mhm.
and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest but also best things to be told is that you did everything you could, that there was nothing else that you could do to change the outcome. Because I think a lot of us, not I think, I know a lot of us, when we take calls like this, even on medicals or anything like that, we blame ourselves. Is there a different line of questioning we could have gone through? Is there, something else that I could have said? Is there anything more that I could have done with whatever resources that I have or just using my voice that I could have helped the situation?
Right. Listen, did I miss something? Did I not hear
Right.
something?
Yeah.
Did I not get them paged out fast enough? Did I not get it sent out? Would it made the outcome any different?
Yeah.
And dispatchers put a lot of that on themselves. Nobody may tell you that. I mean, nobody's blaming you. We just think, oh my gosh, what if I would have done something different? Maybe it would have changed.
Exactly. Yes. That is one of those that's a big thing there.
Right.
Now, there's also there are also times when we end up getting phone calls where someone says a certain thing, but then it turns out to be something completely different. Something that maybe, kind of blows you away and you're left thinking, Why didn't you tell me that? Why was that not the first thing? Now you have a call that
Right.
that follows this.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not a, I mean, now that I know the person's okay, but
Yeah.
yeah. So I took, and this was pretty recent within the last couple of months, took a call and they're like, oh, my friend, she's having problems breathing. I need the ambulance. And she's like in complete freak out mode. So I have to get her calmed down. She doesn't know exactly where they're at.
Mhm.
So she's like, we just moved to this place. I don't know the address. It's out in the county. So thank goodness, you know, we have our lovely rapid deploy mapping system. We were able to map her and figure out where she was at so we could start people. And so she's just saying, my friends, she's having trouble breathing. She just can't breathe. And so I'm like, all right, it's breathing problems. That's our EMD, or emergency medical dispatch protocol we're going to go down.
Mhm.
And so I'm going down and asking her, she's just like, she can't breathe, you know, she's almost unconscious. Well, we end up actually starting CPR. And I said, you know, we need to get her on the floor. She's like, well, we're in a car. I'm like, well, get her out of the car. So I'm like, she's like, we're already out of the car. We're actually she's laying on the road, in the middle of the road. So I'm telling my partner, make sure everybody that's going knows that they're on this dirt road,
Yeah.
laying in the roadway. So I start CPR on it and start mouth to mouth and airway management on her. And so we go through this whole call doing this. EMS is the first to get there. And they give us their triage code red, which is critical, a critical patient. I'm like, okay, well, I believe that. And then the next day they key up and go, dispatch, this is going to be a level 1 trauma, which is a critical trauma patient. And I'm like scratching my head going, what? Huh? Excuse
Right.
me?
Yeah.
How can we go from a breathing medical to a trauma patient, you know?
Yeah.
I'm just like, okay, you know, and I call the hospital and give them the information. Well, after the call's kind of done, said with, I start talking to the deputies, and they're like, yeah, she fell out of the vehicle, and the person that was calling is the person that ran over her and ran over her head.
Oh my God.
What? You know, I was like, maybe we should have started with that.
Right.
So it was nothing like the call. I mean, I strictly just truly believe that we were having a breathing type problem. And in reality, it was a trauma patient. So
Holy moly.
yeah.
And the good thing, you know, in the beginning, you know, you mentioned the person ended up living. They
Right.
were fine, but
Yeah, they actually they
dude.
took him to the hospital, they flew him out to a trauma center. Yeah, you know, so they lived, but I'm like, I'm looking at my partners because there's 3 of us working that night. I'm like, what did I miss? Did I miss something?
Right.
I don't know. Did I not ask the right question? Because, you know, she's like, we were just driving back to wherever they were at. She just started having problems breathing. I've been able to listen to the tape a couple different times because a couple days later, the deputies wanted to come down and listen to it. And I've actually played it back for a couple of other people in the dispatch centers, like new trainees that we have. And I'm just like, I don't think I missed anything, but yeah, it was nothing. Ended up being nothing like I thought the original call was.
Oh man, I can't imagine. I mean, I can actually a little bit. I can imagine, like, if you know you've got trainees, right? You're playing this, and they're listening to it, and then you give them the plot
Right.
twist there at the end, where you're like, "Get this! This is actually what happened," and everyone just, "What?"
And talking to the deputies later, they're like, or later that night or the next day, they're like, we still don't think she is herself processed what happened, the person that called us. Like, she was so traumatized by it, maybe, that she
Right.
wasn't even processing what happened at the time. So,
Oh my Lord! Like
right, it
I've
was
said
crazy.
before, anything can happen in 911.
Right, you
Holy
just
cow!
never, you try to take your calls at face value,
Yeah.
you know, and we all have those regular people that call and go, oh, and we know there are regulars, but you still got to believe what they're saying because
Right.
there's going to be a plot twist in there one of these days.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
there's I've had people ask and say, when people are calling in and they tell you something that just sounds outrageous, how do you respond to that? Like, I take it like it's for real, like, because it'll be
right,
that moment that you don't, because it seems super outrageous, like someone calling in saying, I've got a bear in my front yard, or something like that.
right.
And you're like, oh, okay, well, we'll get somebody over there. That's going to be the time that bear actually, there is a bear there, right?
Well, yeah, and we kind of had that happen in our center because we were taking a call. We'd been taking multiple calls from this lady, and she
Hmm.
always would say, like, her husband's dead, he's passed away, or he's having a medical problem. And we'd get up there, he was fine.
Yeah.
He was fine. She's the one that was having some issues herself. So we
Hmm.
were always getting these calls. And one day she called and said, my husband's dead. And everybody's like, okay, but they still sent the cavalry, because
Right.
sure enough, this time he had passed away.
Yep. See, there's that
So
moment. You
yeah.
always go, you
Right.
always
You
have it
always
as,
have to
that
treat them
highest
like
priority.
right. Yeah.
Because it'll be that one time that whatever happens, and then, hey, you're in the news, and
Right.
that's not where you want to be.
Right. So you just have to take them at their face value, even though
Right.
you think, oh, so and
Yeah.
so's at it again.
Yeah. When I first got off of training for the county, I taken this call from this lady who was saying that there were people who were breaking into her single wide in her trailer. And we've got people that are hauling ass out there, like the noises that I could hear and everything in the background. Like, I was getting chills from listening to it and listening to her scream and all this other stuff. But then it changed because she goes, they're using chainsaws from underneath and coming through the floor. And I questioned her. I mean, everybody is already hauling ass out there,
Right.
but I put this in the narrative, and the officers are like, "Go to secondary because we need to ask you some questions now. What the hell is this?" And they had read it before my person who was on main radios could update them, and so I mute my microphone as she's still talking, and I told them what she was saying. Well, then one of the sergeants who was going home already, he just happened to be listening to the scanner, and he keys up on secondary, and he goes, "Everybody head out there. However, this person is just kind of having some issues. I'll get a hold of their family." So he knew the person, and he
Yeah.
knew that there was something going on. There was nobody there. I mean, she was there. My caller was there, but there was no one who was breaking in. All the noises that I was hearing, she was actually making those noises.
Oh,
But even if it sounds super outrageous, again, you send everybody.
yeah. You just don't know. You don't know because that
Yes,
one time it's really going to be something true. Yeah.
exactly. Now, you have you go through all of this, all this experience. You end up going and becoming a supervisor as well. And now, years later, like you ended up enrolling into a program, which I think is for APCO, correct? It's the RPL
Yeah.
program.
It's the RPL for APCO.
So, what was the motivation to end up doing this? Because this is a year long
Right.
certification, right? Like, this whole thing, like, there's a project that you got to do, but does it kind of stem from you also wanting to move into being a supervisor and just doing more and more?
Yeah, so I became a supervisor.
Hmm.
The director that we had at the time, she just left us. She was very motivated to push us and become better leaders and all this stuff. And she's like, do your RPL, do your EMP, do this stuff, and we'll back you. Just do it. So I did. I actually put in for one of the scholarships with APCO and was lucky enough to get it. So half my RPL was paid by that scholarship, and our agency's paying the other half for me to do this. So
That's awesome.
yeah, so yeah, it's a year-long program. I think there's 7 or 8, 9 modules. I can't remember off the top of my head with it. And so it's a year long, and then within that program, I have to do some type of project with it. So I just got done with my first 8 weeks of it right before Christmas.
Oh man.
So yeah, so tomorrow we start our next section for another 8 weeks. So it's nice. I think we have 7 or 8 of us actually enrolled in this one right now. So we have a pretty small group compared to the others, but we get to go in and post stuff on forums, and we chat back and forth, and um, they'll put out ideas, or I'll put out ideas, and they're like, hey, could you send this to us? Can we see this? Can we see that? Can I have this? So it gives us, and they're from all over the United States. So it's kind of cool to connect with other people within the United States,
That's
that are
awesome.
taking this. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool that you'll be able to come together and like you said, meet people from all over, but
Hmm.
also kind of see what they're all doing, right?
Right.
And get some inspiration from that as well, and motivation. What is your, and if you don't mind me asking, if you're able to say, what does your project consist of? Like, what are you going to be doing?
So I feel like I took on a big one when I did this. So my project is actually going to be kind of about 10 months long, actually. I'm doing on mental health for 911 dispatchers.
Hmm.
So I'm still kind of in the process of finalizing some of this stuff. But it's going to be, I'm going to take, I think, 5, if I have it worked out in my brain. I have 5 of them that I'm going to do like an hour long. It may not be me, it may be somebody that I'm bringing in,
Hmm.
do a presentation like on Crowdcast. I'm also putting it, I'm going to put the link and some other stuff too. And I'm doing another 5 on the Kansas Learning Management System for 911, which will actually be recorded, and I should be able to put into Crowdcast as well. So it'll be like 10 little mini sessions on mental health and 911 for the 911 dispatchers.
That'll
So,
be excellent.
yeah. So it's kind of a big project. I was like, maybe I should have smalled it down a little, but I went big. If I'm gonna do it, I'm just gonna do it big.
Well,
So
from every time that I've spoken to you, and also the like the session that you did for Dare to Be Great 4, the other sessions that you've done for, some of the training days that Kansas put out there, but also just hearing your story and learning more about you, I kind of feel though that it wouldn't be you unless you went big with it, and doing a project like this. I mean, you've been around it, you grew up with it,
right.
and you've got all of this experience, whether it be the calls that you've taken or family members that have done certain things, also your time as an EMT. And there's a lot that you can do with this program, but also the project and the sessions that you're going to be putting out there. So I'm excited to see what you put out there, and I'm glad that you went big.
Yeah. I'm going big. Go
Yeah.
big, go home. So yeah. So yeah, I'm still trying to finalize everything. And like I said,
Hmm.
I'm gonna bring people in and have them talk about some specific stuff. And so it's not all just gonna be me talking. I'm gonna have people do different sessions and stuff. So
I
yeah.
kind of feel like it'll be good to also, while talking about, these main topics and everything, also kind of how the job changed you a little bit and how that impacts that mental health and wellness as well. Because there's a lot of different things that changed me throughout my course of being in dispatch. And that's a lot of stuff, that I continue to share. And I can see that you would be sharing similar things that happened to you
Yeah.
during these sessions.
Yeah. So, it's a tough job. And we bring this job home sometimes, and it's not always the best for us to bring it home. But it depends on what kind of system you have at home too.
Right.
So is it something that you can bring home and talk to somebody? I'm thankful on my part that I've always had my parents. My dad passed away several years ago, so I don't have him anymore. But since then, my mom actually has moved in so
Mhm.
with me, so we've lived together, and she knows when I'm having a bad day, and she's like, "You're being grumpy, you're being bad," But I can bounce stuff off of her still too.
That's
So
cool.
just to have like a support system, and to find that support system, because it may not be at home, it might have to be people at work or from other places. So
Yeah, any place that you basically feel safe enough,
right.
to be able to open up, right?
Yeah, yeah. So And thank goodness, the agency that I'm currently working with, they are 100% having us go to debriefings, and they'll make sure that our time's covered and we don't have to worry about it. And they get us to those debriefings that we have. So
That is always good.
right.
Those are the things that I love to hear. So going into the wrap up of this has been awesome to have you on, learn more
Thanks.
about you, your story. Yes. And what you're going to be doing as well, which I'm excited about. If you could go back in time to when you first started out, whether it be EMT to now or dispatch to now, whichever one, if you could go back in time with the knowledge that you have now to talk to yourself in the beginning, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, it's a tough question. I've kind of thought about this because I've seen your other podcast, and I'm like, I know he's going to ask this question. So, I would say, don't be too hard on yourself. It seems like that the type of personalities that get into emergency services, we probably pick on ourselves more than anybody else.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So give yourself a break. It's a tough job. You're gonna learn it. You're gonna get it. Just relax and just give yourself a break sometimes. So
Excellent.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on, and just people who are watching, listening right now, make sure to look out for Sabrina with all the stuff that she's going to have coming on when she gets everything figured out. I'm sure that's going to be on social media or whatever. Is there any way that people can find you? Like, can they find you on LinkedIn or anything like that, just to be kind of aware of some of those posts that you might be putting out?
I'm on old school. I'm I've been around for a while. So, but no, I'm sure that I've been working with some of the like Halcyon Frank and some of those. So some of those sites, I'm sure I'm going to get stuff out there. I'll reach out to Ricardo and see if he can put stuff up for me too. We're gonna get it out. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, excellent. I'm excited for it. And again, thank you for coming on and just having the courage to open up and share your story. Thank you.
It's been great. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I will be right back here with you in just one moment. And for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us. And that is going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/Within the Trenches Podcast. This episode was sponsored by InDigital as well as Carbine. Shout out to patrons as always, but also Facebook subscribers. If you want to be a patron of the podcast, you can check us out. That is patreon.com/WTT podcast. And then for Facebook, if you just go to the podcast page on there, it's just Within the Trenches Podcast. There's a button that says subscribe. And it's on there. It's 99 cents per month. That's it. And you get a bunch of awesome, cool stuff. So make sure to check that out there. And I appreciate all of you so very much. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, as well as Twitter. And then you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone. We'll see you in the next one.